Welcome to another edition of Touring the AFC South. I am your host, Mike Patton. And on this episode, we will be talking with the one, the only, the Meghan Hall on the Indianapolis Colts. And, of course, their draft and free agency. And, of course, trades, too. We got to remember that. But, like every show, we start off with the Get Off Your Chest segment. And this one actually is not going to be about football, which probably shocks a lot of people. But yes, I do talk about any and everything. The Get Off Your Chest segment does not just stick with football all the time. It's anything that's on my mind. And I'm pretty sure that some can kind of understand that I've been watching a little playoff basketball and something's on my mind there. I'm going to talk about a particular player or maybe two particular players. That would be Draymond Green and Dylan Brooks. Now, Draymond Green, of course, the Warriors are the Kings series. It's 2-0 to the Kings. It's been some great shots, some great play, and a lot of energy. Well, of course, the other night, game 2, Domantas Sabonis, he actually going to get a rebound. He kind of shoves Clay, falls down or pulls him down. He's on the ground. Draymond Green's around his feet. Draymond Green's basically is around Draymond Green's feet. He grabs his foot, and Draymond Green proceeds to step on him like he's a sidewalk. But, in that instance, I get it. And a lot of people were saying, well, he shouldn't have grabbed his foot. Well, I completely understand that. He shouldn't have grabbed his foot. I get it. But does it really elicit a response like that? Nah, really doesn't. He kind of earned what he got. Did I think he would get suspended? No. But it happened. And, of course, he drew the ire of a lot of people, especially Kings fans. And with Draymond, a lot of people do not like him more than likely outside of Golden State fans, which is probably really true. Unless you're like a basketball purist and you think about different things and whatever. But we're not going to get into that right now. Similar to Draymond Green, Dylan Brooks is a guy that kind of does a few things that irks people. He gets on people's nerves. Now, you can say some of the things, maybe he does something that's a little dirty every now and then. Maybe that's up to your interpretation. But he plays to the echo of the whistle. He does a few things. And let me just give you an example. In the Lakers versus Grizzlies game, he basically has a fadeaway hit on him by LeBron James or whatever happens. He goes down the court. He's yelling in his face. LeBron, it catches his attention. He says a few choice words back to him. And, of course, Dylan Brooks is probably laughing or whatever about it. Then he calls LeBron old. But I will tell people that's not all of the quote. He didn't just call him old. He did say that he's a great player. So for those who want to hear all the actual quote instead of the soundbite. But, all those different things he does, he irks and annoys people. And people do not like him outside of Memphis, similar to Draymond Green. I said all that to say a lot of people wonder, why do they do these things? Why do they do that? They know they're playing with fire. They're doing this. They're doing that. Why do they do this? It's because they have to. If you notice, they have to do these things because it is what their teams require and need of them. They need a guy that does the dirty work, a guy that takes that attention, a guy that plays with fire and brimstone and passion. Now, can we say that if Draymond Green was on that team, wasn't on the Warriors team or starting or playing or whatever, that they would have won multiple championships? We definitely can't say that. Can we say for the Grizzlies that if Dylan Brooks isn't on the team, do they make or kind of make the ascension that they have made over the last few years? You really can't say that. And these guys play this way because they have to. Because if they turn that energy off, if they try to play a different style, it's not who they are. They're not being who they are on the basketball court. And you won't get some of the same results, which means you may not get wins. So for their teams, they deal with what comes with it, the ebbs and the flows of that particular person. Now, I know we like talking about what they do wrong and they did this and they did that, but I didn't want to focus as much on that, but I wanted to focus on the why certain players a particular way. In football, the same way. You have people that play the echo of the whistle. You have people that do all those different things, but they do those things to keep themselves, one, in the league, and secondly, they're fulfilling a role for a team to be a winning team. That is simply what it is, whether we love it, whether we hate it, whether we congratulate it, whether we want to throw that guy out the league. They do those things because they want to win. Simply put, that's my get it off your chest segment for this episode. Now, waiting patiently to probably add a few words to what I said is Meghan Hall. Now, I'm going to give the floor to you. If you have anything you want to throw in there about what I said, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for having me on again. It's always a pleasure when we get to chop it up. So, honestly, I was listening to you and just digesting what you were saying. I would 100% agree. It's not something that I would immediately think about of it being something that they are tasked with doing. It is their job to kind of do the dirty work there. Because I think Draymond especially takes on that villain role. He feeds on that. Like that's his MO. Everyone has an alter ego, right? When they get on the court. Like it's a little bit different than when you get off the court. Um, but yeah, I think you're right. I think it is their job. I think that's what gives Golden State an edge. It's what gives the Grizzlies an edge. And it's honestly you probably don't see it as much now in today's basketball because it's frowned upon, right? You're being that extra on the court. You're like absolutely not. Like you're getting teed up. They're gonna get you out. They're gonna get you off the floor at some point. But if you remember basketball from the 90s, that was regular. That was definitely regular. Malice at the Palace, those type of things. So yeah, I would absolutely agree. And looking at that lens, I would still say that I thought about it and I've actually shared some thoughts as well. I would still say that the suspension for Draymond still stands because it was an intentional stomp on the chest. Especially you could have inflicted harm, broken bones, bruises, anything else on Sabonis. But I think you're right. He's going to have his way. He's definitely going to have his way. The issue is that the Kings are prepared. And
Right.
I think that's why he's frustrated. It's because he's like, hey, I'm usually the one doing the dirty work here. I'm usually the one being physical with everyone else, not the other way around. Like, what's happening here? And the Kings knew that. So the fact that they've got Draymond frustrated, they got this team frustrated, shout out to the Kings for that. They came well prepared.
Well, Draymond probably ran up the tunnel and did a podcast on what happened. But anyway, I'm not gonna give him too much love on probably doing that either. But we did have some comments in the Twitter AFC South inbox. Justin Patton, one of the games last year in the NBA Finals, Draymond Green did all the dirty work to get the Celtics out of the game mentally. Yes, he does play mental gymnastics in the same vein as Dennis Rodman. He definitely does that. But what I am going to say to kind of wrap a bow on this one is that God's property and Drew Hill were definitely shining down on that stomp that happened on the court.
I
So
love it. I love it. I
they
love
were they were definitely shining down on that stomp. But kind of getting to something else that got beaten down this year. Unfortunately,
it.
that would be
Wow.
the Indianapolis Colts. They did get kind of
Wow. That transition though.
beaten down just a little bit this year. Yeah, a little bad. But hey, there's always next year, and next year is now, and it's the off season. Of course, some changes got made to this team. One of the changes that definitely happened was at the cornerback position. Now, a favorite of the Indianapolis Colts, Brandon Faison, was gone. Now I know he's not a favorite. I'm just kidding,
I was
but
like,
I'm pretty sure.
if Chris Lewis is watching this, he's probably going to unravel.
But he actually went back to the Raiders. He came over from the Raiders, then went back to the Raiders. So, I'm pretty sure Colts fans were very joyous to see him go on his merry way. Am I correct?
I think you would be correct in that assessment. Yes.
Well, one player that they might not have been as joyous to see leave, that would be Mr. Stephon Gilmore. Now, he got traded to the Dallas Cowboys for a fifth-round draft pick in this year's draft. And now, did you see him potentially staying given what all happened this off season and during the season, and Jeff Saturday jumping in to be coach and all those different things, did you see him even having an inkling of wanting to stick around?
Ooh, we're just going up for all the haymakers today, I see. I think it really depends on what the Colts had to ask themselves a question. Are we rebuilding? Are we retooling? Or is it both, right? You have to ask those questions. And when you might not have the answers to those, it becomes a lot tougher to convince players to stay, right? So if you've been following the storyline along, you would have known that Stephon Gilmore requested the trade away, right? And I get it.
Oh,
I get it. I wholeheartedly do. Right. So this makes it a little bit more interesting when you realize, oh, Gilmore requested the trade. Okay. So what happens is you realize, okay, hey, I came here. Season wasn't what we thought, right? This team is definitely a little bit further away than even I thought. I gotta go. Like, let me go. The other thing is he's on, and this is being, admittedly on the tail end of his career, right? He's still got some years left on him, but he is on the tail end of his career. So he wants to go to a team that is contending, that gives him a chance. So I could understand why he might go to Dallas, right? Or if there was any other teams that were involved in the mix. I don't think he foresaw the Jeff Saturday wrench. I don't think anybody really foresaw the Jeff Saturday monkey wrench. But do I think that that was a deciding factor? Probably not necessarily, but it was wrapped in the totality of the season, right? Like all the things that the Colts went through. I mean, for 6 weeks there was twists, turns. I mean, the train is off the tracks completely into the grass. So I could see why if you're sitting down at the end of the season and you're evaluating, you're saying, okay, no, I can't be around for this. So yeah, I don't blame him necessarily. It did shock me to see him traded per se, but I think it was more of a hey, we'll do you a solid and we'll make that happen.
yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I didn't know that part about him requesting the trade. That was definitely quietly kept, as
Hmm.
Stephon Gilmore is very, very quiet. But I can see it happening, and of course, I just have to wonder what his thought process is. Just kind of seeing this happen, and just Saturday come in. I have to think: does he look around and say, "Am I on a Saturday Night Live skit? Did this really just happen?" You have to think that about those different things. But um, I do want to talk about one other loss that happened this offseason. Not exactly a big loss, but a guy that actually stayed healthy for the first time in his career. That'd be Paris Campbell. So he's left, go on to I believe it's in Carolina or New York. He's in New York, I believe.
New York, New York.
So that'll be an interesting thing there because they their wide receivers couldn't stay healthy last year. So it'll be interesting to see if he can actually be the healthy one to come in. But that's another story for another day. So what do you think of that loss, Steve? Were you really kind of indifferent about that one, or were you just like, hey, it is what it is? He couldn't stay healthy while he was with us, and good luck on wherever you're going.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think for me, I was always on the side that if he could stay healthy and produce a solid season, then it might beg the question of, okay, hey, do you give him another deal? I think Paris Campbell did enough this past season to warrant the conversation for another deal. That was my personal opinion on it. Staying healthy for all 17 games was nothing short of phenomenal for him. He had played 15 games before this season. That's in 3 seasons. So that's a lot of injuries. That's a lot of time missed, time lost. But he was second on the team in yards, second on the team in touchdowns, and top 10 in the league in yards of separation. So if you get Paris Campbell going and keep him healthy, the talent has always been there. The issue is the health. So I think for the Colts, it was a matter of okay, who do we prioritize? What are we getting here? And where's the value? Where's the upside? Where it becomes tricky is that Paris Campbell, I think, doesn't have as much upside in the fact of like, hey, he doesn't do anything else for the Colts other than be on the wide receiver room. But who they kept at a much cheaper option was Ashton Doolin. They kept Doolin because of his special teams ability, and he can play depth, for the wide receiver position. They need that sort of thing. Ashton Doolin is all pro at special teams. And I think for them, it was also about the money. They weren't going to give him the contract that the Giants gave him, even though it honestly wasn't too far off from what I thought the Colts might offer. Um, but I think the Colts kind of knew they were out after the season. My opinion is probably maybe it wasn't enough potentially, to keep him around. And again, the added skills, Chris Ballard's really big on like, hey, if you've got duality there, like, yeah, we're definitely going to keep you there or prioritize keeping you. So I wasn't totally shocked. It's always a long shot for Paris to come back to the team. But I will say this: I have been critical of Paris Campbell for several seasons, and even I was like, okay, he's got to go before this past season. He's got to go because you weren't getting what you drafted, right? 4.4 speed. I mean, great hands, big playability. You just weren't getting that consistently enough. So when he finally put it all together this season, but our offense was defunct. Okay, well, makes it really tough to evaluate, what he could be. I wish him the best in New York. I think he's going to be a great target for Danny Dimes, aka Mr. Daniel. But I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think the Colts will miss Paris Campbell that much, and I don't mean that rudely. I just mean you still got the biggest thing Paris Campbell would be provide is third downs, right? You could do the third down conversions, and the speed is definitely a factor. But you got Isaiah McKenzie, who is going to step in for Paris Campbell, and which is a nice fill in if you pick him up in free agency like the Colts did. And I think from there you just got to add to the wide receiver room. They'll probably likely draft an additional wide receiver to kind of shore up that depth, and go from there.
Yeah, we'll definitely see what happens. You spoke about Isaiah McKenzie. We're going to talk about him a little bit more, talk about the additions going along with the Indianapolis Colts and going into next season. But we're going to get into that right after a commercial break. Oh, I did want to point out as well, with Paris Campbell, the biggest thing I think about when I think of his career and him not being able to stay healthy, you can't make the club in the tub, man. You cannot make the club in the tub. You got to be healthy sometime. But hey, it is what it is, and it is a physical game. But we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back talking about the Indianapolis Colts and their offseason moves on touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton.
Whether it's local or long distance, Milligan Logistics has you covered. Milligan Logistics was established in 2020 with over a combined 15 years of experience in trucking, hauling, and logistics, along with over 50 years collectively of project management experience. Again, whether it's near or far, Milligan Logistics has you covered with quality service, efficiency while taking pleasure in exceeding clients' expectations. Need goods moved short or long distance? Milligan Logistics has you covered. Just reach out to them at 615-354-2618. That's 615-354-2618. Or you can send them an email at milliganlogistics@gmail.com. Again, that's milliganlogistics@gmail.com.
From Milligan Logistics. I know you moving somewhere, somebody gonna holler at Milligan Logistics, but that's just, I just want to highlight my commercial a little bit. But we're going to talk about a little bit more about some people that are actually moving to Indianapolis. That would be some free agent additions to the Indianapolis Colts team. Now, one of those is former 49ers defensive end Samson Ebukam. Now, for those that aren't aware, he signed a 3-year, $27 million deal with $11 million guaranteed in the first year. So that's a lot big guarantee for 1 year. But going along with that, you got to think, hey, they're needing somebody to step up and be the alpha in the pass rush room from an edge perspective. Now, they got Kwity Paye. They put in time invested in Kwity Paye, and we totally get that. But they've been trying to find a Robin to his Batman or a Batman to his Robin, however you want to put it. They've been trying to find this guy for a while. Last year was Yannick Ngakoue, and that didn't quite work out the way people thought it would. Now you bring in Ebukam, and he's had 9.5 sacks over the last 2 years. So not exactly the most eye-popping numbers. Now I ask you, Megan, do you think that those stats were a little bit slighted because of, the rotation the 49ers have, plus Bosa he was playing with, who was the defensive player of the year, by the way? Or do you think this is particularly who he is, and you may be kind of slightly frustrated with what he brings?
So I do think the first scenario, I do think that his stats were impacted by, a ridiculous defensive line in the 49ers. You're playing next to Bosa. Yeah, good luck if you've got production there. So the fact that he was able to produce next to Bosa is really, really great in my eyes. The thing here is, yeah, his stats aren't going to wow you, right? But turn on the tape. You'll see he's highly disruptive. I think the other thing to look at is that his ability to get to the quarterback is now, hey, I might be ballparking this a little bit, but it's probably about 4 to 5 tenths of a second faster than Yannick Ngakoue. Now he's not going to, again, he's not going to wow you with the stats, but can he bring the pressures? Can he bring the disruptions? Yeah, he can. And the thing is, the Colts don't necessarily need him to, churn out 20 sacks or anything else crazy like that. Like we don't need that necessarily. But what you do need is pressure. So the Colts defensive line ranked 25th in the league for pressures. It's not great. It's not great at all. So you're talking about most of your pressure coming from that interior of the line with DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart, and you're not getting as much from Kwity Paye, who is still dealing with some injuries on and off, and you weren't getting as much as you thought you were going to get from Yannick Ngakoue, especially with the 9 sacks there. That's the lowest in his career in the last 4 to 5 seasons. I think the highest he had was about 12 when he was in Jacksonville. So you were hoping to get this guy who could be disruptive, and you didn't get that. He came second on the team in pressures to DeForest Buckner, oddly enough, from the D tackle position. Yeah, when you start looking at it, you're like, okay, we gotta get something different. Now, what I likely think here that Chris Ballard saw was, okay, hey, this guy is still effective, still an athlete, still can get the pressures. We may not get, the 9 sacks. Heck, we may not even get 6 sacks, but what we will get is someone who can create the disruption and allow the rest of the line to be effective. Where this gets very interesting is that you'll see on that, if I'm facing the quarterback here and I'm along the defensive line here on that right side where Ebickham is going to be, who's going to be behind him? That's the question that you really want to ask. It's not even necessarily Ebickham, is who's going to be behind him. So the rotation has got to be there. You've got Dio behind Kwity, and you're hoping that Dio can stay healthy as well, and that can be your left side of the line. But I'm really looking for, like, what will the Colts do at the edge position? Will they get someone who can be just as disruptive? Will they draft someone who they can groom and, eventually be the replacement for Ebickham if he stays long term? That's really what you want to look at. Someone who I think in mind is probably Derek Hall out of Auburn. That is my bias anyways. I'm an Auburn fan. Sorry, shameless plug. But it's a good fit there. I think that Derek's going to need several games to get up to playing caliber, or at least starting playing caliber, but he could step in really nicely as a depth position. I think for the Colts, they have to get that defensive line shored up. You cannot be cheap in the trenches. You've got to have the correct guys and the correct depth, and that's also on the offensive trenches too. Because that was also an issue for them this year. And again, you can't have all your pressure coming from DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart. If one of them goes out, that's the other issue. The depth and the production behind them was little to none. So they've got quite some issues, behind Grover, behind Buckner, and on over across the line.
All right. Definitely some things going on. But, of course, for Colts fans, you're hoping that Ebickham can bring some greatness. Now, I want to tell everyone, before I get too much more into everything, I did not bring up one particular gentleman that did leave for New York as well. That would be Bobby Okereke. I did not bring him up because Shaq Leonard is coming back this year, and he hopefully will be healthy for the Colts. And you have EJ Speed there. So that's why I did not bring that up. I'm pretty sure that there are Colts fans or NFL football fans in general that are wondering why I did not bring him up in the losses for the Colts. That's why, because you have those two guys, and I'm pretty sure they're going to be solid there at that position. One position they were not solid at was kicking. Kicking was definitely one you got to look at and be like, oh my God, is he going to make it? Then I need to cover one eye and keep one eye open. What's going on? But they did bring in Mr. Matt Gay from the LA Rams. Signed him to a 4-year, $22.5 million deal, the largest deal for a kicker in NFL history. Now, some are questioning, why would they give this type of deal to a kicker? Yeah, you're talking about a kicker? Yes, a kicker. The reason why, he's the last couple of years with the Rams, 60 of 64 field goals, 79 of 81 PATs. That's automatic. The only other guy that probably is more automatic than him at this point in the last few years, that would be Justin Tucker. So I can see why they spent the money. What do you think of this kicker mega deal? It's a kicker mega deal. I have to call it that.
Yeah. What does Pat McAfee say? Kickers are people too. Punters are people too. Yeah. I'll say this. I was a little stunned to see this kind of deal come through, but then I had to go look at the deal. And I'm like, okay, so it's not nearly as big and as impactful as you think it is. You go look at the guarantees, you're like, okay, all right, I see why they gave him the money. And it's the biggest contract, quote unquote, for a kicker ever in free agency, because you don't normally give kickers contracts in free agency, so they have nothing to put it up against. So take that with a grain of salt. But what I don't take with a grain of salt, and you should take seriously, is the fact that the Colts kicking woes have been really bad for the last couple of seasons. I'll take you all the way back to when you had Adam Vinatieri. Let's go back to 2019? So I was in person for a Colts-Falcons game. I was at Lucas Oil. I remember watching Adam Vinatieri miss field goals in warmups and doink the football off the field goal post in warmups. The same thing happened in the game, barely made a field goal, and you could collectively hear the audience go, oh, all at the same time. So everyone is like, "Ooh, okay, Benny, like we love you, we're giving you grace, but this is rough." So the Colts really didn't know when to move on from Adam Vinatieri early enough. Then you bring in Rodrigo Blankenship, thinking that he's the answer. Well, he was an undrafted free agent. You bring him in, he does his rookie year. The issue was, when he came back for the following season, the Colts weren't convinced on him either. They brought in Chase McLaughlin, who, quote unquote, he lost out to Rodrigo Blankenship in training camp, only for them to let go of Rodrigo Blankenship during the beginning parts of the season and to bring Chase McLaughlin back. It was that bad because he was missing game-winning field goals. He missed a potential game-winning field goal in the Texans Colts game, the first game of the season, the tie, if you remember that. But he had missed several before then. I think his field goal percentage was probably somewhere close in the 80% or so. So not particularly great. Also missing, extra points as well. So you bring in Chase McLaughlin. He actually does a pretty solid job. He does a pretty bang up job. He's one of the bright spots of the season, along with the special teams unit, which was ranked, I think if I remember correctly, 8th in the league. So pretty solid, right? And I thought for a second there that the Colts would likely extend him, or at least, hey, give him another deal. They didn't, because Matt Gay was available. And I get it. I totally get it. If the guy's available and you can upgrade at the position, you need something to shore up this team and maybe provide a bit more security from we'll call it a ailing offense. Yeah, I'd sign Matt Gay too. So I think it was, one of the bigger moves for the Colts in the free agency, obviously because of the nature of the signing. But I think it was just about like, hey, where can we get better at these positions? And if we can do it and grab top tier talent, hey, we're going to do that.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. Now, I don't know if he's a top tier talent, but he is a talent, and you need somebody at quarterback.
Top tier for what was available. Top tier for what was available, I think.
Well, I get you. Matt Gay, definitely top 10 is what's available. But, the guy I'm talking about at quarterback is Mr. Gardner Minshew. Yeah. You brought in Mr. Gardner Minshew from the Philadelphia Eagles. He was the backup there. Now, a lot of people thought that a couple years ago that he may have ended up in Indianapolis. However, it didn't happen. He ended up in Philadelphia, which I never thought he was going to be traded in the AFC South anyway. But he goes away in NFC East, and now he comes back to the AFC South. But he's playing for the Colts. Now, there has been some little murmurs around that the Colts may not take a quarterback at 4. Jim Irsay and Ballard have kind of stoked the fire. I've heard a little talk from you and other Colt fans that particularly would not be you would particularly not be surprised if they did not go quarterback at number 4. So I'm going to ask you this. Say they don't go quarterback at number 4. Say they don't really pick a quarterback up, let's say like the 4th round or something like that. I'm just throwing it out there. It may not happen, but it may. Are you comfortable with Gardner Minshew being your starting quarterback?
I don't even think it's a matter of me being comfortable. I think it's a matter of accepting reality, and this is where we are. So I think for me, the Colts have got to get off the quarterback carousel at some point, right? And I think, all right, let's say that Gardner Minshew is the starting quarterback here. The question would still remain, who is going to be the guy? Because it's not Gardner Minshew, and that's not a slight to him, but he's not a franchise quarterback type of guy. He's a solid backup who could step in. If you need him to start a couple of games, he can do that. But I don't see starting quarterback out of Gardner Minshew. So it begs the question, all right, well, if he's your starting quarterback, who did you draft? Because you didn't take one at 4, but you got to get one in this draft because you've got to have one on the roster, right? You've let go of Matt Ryan. You're going to let go of Nick Foles. That'll probably be a post-June 1 cut. You may or may not keep Sam Ehlinger. Obviously, you don't think he's the guy either. So who did you draft? If that's the case, if you don't draft one until the 4th round, what I'm thinking in that range, there's a couple of guys who come to mind. So it would be Jaron Hall, BYU. So the Colts have had a couple of meetings with him. Aiden McConnell from Purdue is the other guy. Now, Colts fans don't get particularly excited about either one of those names because they're not the big 4 guys. And, hey, they're also not Hendon Hooker or anything like that. Heck, they're not even Tanner McKee at that point. But the thing is, there's always sleepers in this draft, right? And Chris Ballard left the door open at the owners' meetings in Arizona when he said, hey, everyone talks about the top 4 quarterbacks, but there's some really good guys, and we're going to do our due diligence here. We're going to see who works for us. So he basically said, it might not happen at 4. I just want to let you know that it might not happen at 4, or we're going to take the guy who fits us best, who can give us the best chance to win. Now, if they don't take a quarterback at 4, it's likely because they don't like their scenarios there. They don't like their options. They're not going to force a pick, right? They got to get the pick right, which is what Chris Ballard has said for, I don't know, 3 months now. Just to put it out there lightly, he has pretty much pledged, hey, I will get this right. He even did so much as take, 6 weeks to find the right coach and 13 candidates and multiple rounds of interviews to get Shane Steichen, because now you have to get it right. There is really no room for error. There's no grace anymore because you're 6 seasons in on a failed plan, on a failed philosophy. So you got to get it right now. So again, I'm telling people, do I think it's going to be a quarterback at 4? Yeah, probably 98% sure it's a quarterback at 4 or 3 if they decide to move up. But the 2% is for Chris Ballard saying, you know what? I don't like this. You know what? This isn't my guy. And he's going to look at other options. He's either going to stay there and pick something like a cornerback or edge at 4, or he's going to say, you know what? Don't like these. What else you got? Let me go get some more picks, which he's notorious for doing. But I would not be surprised if the pick is not a quarterback at 4 for those reasons I just stated.
Oh, boy. Lots to digest there. I'm going to take a quick minute to digest all that you just told me. When we come back, we're going to talk about the draft. Yes, the draft is almost upon us. It is next week, and the Colts have some decisions to make. We're going to find out about a couple of those decisions, or from Megan's perspective. We're going to find those out after the commercial break on Touring the AFC South. But they're also like that.
Did you see my picture on the artwork for the show? Well, it was taken by Joshua Silver's Photography. Let me tell you, he handled the whole shoot with class and professionalism, and he can do the same for you. Whether it's a model shoot, couples photos, headshots, maternity shoot, senior photos, or more, he has you covered. Just give him a call at 423-557-6746. Again, that's 423-557-6746. Or you can check him out on Instagram at Joshua Silvers Photography to book your shoot. Again, Joshua Silvers Photography, where class and professionalism meets great photos.
All right, and we're back from our last commercial break, but certainly not least, we do have to talk about the draft. And there is a particular thing called quarterback position that goes along with the Indianapolis Colts that some people are wondering who is going to play it. Now, there are 4 guys that have been mentioned ad nauseum in this draft process. That would be C.J. Stroud from Ohio State, or I'm sorry, the Ohio State, as they say.
I was about to say.
Then you have from Alabama, you have Bryce Young. I like to call him Rev because he looks like Rev from Remember the Titans to me. But, hey, you have him there.
Okay.
He reminds me of him. But, then you have Mr. Anthony Richardson, who is a physical freak of nature playing quarterback. Then you have the last guy that I want to mention, and I want to throw out this name because I heard this name listening to a podcast from Mr. Teron Davenport. Now, Teron didn't say it. It was talking with TD. They were talking about the draft. And I heard this name from Mr. Emory Hunt. Now, Emory Hunt football game plan, if you haven't got that, over 1,000+ breakdowns and profiles of players. He 12-hour days doing this. It's a PDF file. You pay for it. Boom, it gets sent to you. Just like that. But he came up with a nickname for Will Levis that I have not heard, and I think it fits so perfectly. He called him Bluegrass Bortles. Now, for those that don't know, Blake Bortles was the quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he was a fantasy football quarterback star, but he could never get it done in clutch time. So the numbers would look good, but they were all in basically garbage time. So his nickname from now on for me for a while will be Bluegrass Bortles for Will Levis. So between those 4 quarterbacks, and again, shout out to Emory Hunt for that nickname. That is a fantastic nickname. I love it. But for those 4 quarterbacks, who is the guy you can really see the Colts taking out of those 4?
Ooh, if you'd asked me this question a couple of weeks ago, I definitely would have had a solid answer. But now things are getting very interesting. So over the last, I would say probably week or so, you've heard rumblings that, okay, Bryce Young is the assumed pick at number 1. So that begs to say, who will be at 2 for the Texans and so forth if Carolina stays at 3 and Colts stay at 4. I would have thought that it would be Anthony Richardson or Will Levis would be, options. But now CJ Stroud has a potential at 4, and the Colts could stay at 4 and not have to move to get him, which makes things very interesting. And holy cow, what a scenario for the Colts, for them to stay at 4 and potentially land one of the top 2 quarterbacks, in my opinion, in the draft. That is a dream scenario for Chris Ballard, and holy cow, you didn't have to do a lot to do it. So I think I'm going to go with CJ Stroud because my mock draft that's who I picked in my mock draft a couple weeks ago. And by the way, I only did 1 mock draft because mock draft overload is real right now. We did a segment about that on my podcast earlier in the week, and it is so real. There are so many mock drafts, and I cannot do it. So I did 1 and 1 only. But in that mock draft, CJ Stroud was still on the board at 4, so I took him. And at that time, it looked like, people filled my mentions on the internets, as I like to say, with comments, oh, that will never happen. He'll be gone by then. Like, you should have picked Levis. You should have picked Richardson because that's more likely. But I thought to myself, is there a scenario where something throws off the top 4 picks? And it could be something like Bryce Young going 1. Would the Texans actually take CJ Stroud is a big question. And then if they don't, what do they do at 2? Do they go edge? Do they go another position of need at 2? Arizona, what do they do at 3? Do they stay? And then, of course, the Colts could also be, a disruptor of the top picks too. Let's say that they don't pick CJ Stroud and they go, Levis or they go Richardson. So then that becomes really chaotic for the top 10. But this is the way my brain thinks, is that like, it's just not going to go the way people think it's going to go. And we see this happen every year. It happens all the time. Last year, it was Kenny Pickett. Everyone thought all these quarterbacks were going in the first round, and Kenny Pickett was the only one. The only one. So I keep my mind open for that. And if that's the case, yeah, I mean, give me CJ Stroud at that point. Now, I will say this. This is my deep, deep pipe dream. I would love to see Bryce Young as a Colt, but I just know it's very unlikely to happen. Now, don't ask me what scenario or how that's going to happen. That is just, just my pillow talk at night when I'm talking to myself about what I'd like to see for this team. But if you're talking about like tier 1 quarterbacks, what I think, separates the all 4, tier 1 is Bryce Young, it's CJ Stroud. I'd take CJ Stroud at 4 all day, wouldn't even think twice about it. And that's over Anthony Richardson, that's over Will Levis.
Okay. All right. Now we do have to switch over to the defensive side of the ball. And of course, we mentioned earlier, cornerback. A lot of attrition there. Position that needs to be filled. Cornerback. Just kind of put an emphasis on that. But they do have some help there. But do you see them, like, I think you harped on a Derek Hall from Auburn, by the way, but do you see them kind of digging into the D-line and getting some more depth for a pass rusher as well, along with a cornerback? By the way, they need a cornerback. I know I mentioned it a few times, but I just wanted to say it again. But you see them digging a little bit more into getting defensive line help that they seriously need.
Yeah, I think that's definitely on the docket. Now here's the thing. It's about where it comes, right? Like if there's top tier talent available at 4 and none of your quarterbacks are there, yeah, they could probably go edge at 4. But I've also left the scenario open that they could go cornerback at 4 as well and come back and get edge at 35 or even a little bit deeper into the Browns. Where this becomes very interesting is at 4, if you start looking at cornerbacks, the first one that should come to mind is Christian Gonzalez. Absolute freak of an athlete, top tier skills. Would Chris Ballard be tempted by that at 4 if all of his quarterback options are gone? That's a question. And I've thrown out this scenario multiple times. If you trade back, which is something that's very likely for Chris Ballard to do, would you take a Joey Porter Jr. at that point in the middle of the first round? It's very possible. But I do think, let's say the assumption is that quarterback is the pick in the first round. Let's go there, right? So then you start, what do you do at 35? That's where I think your quarterback is going to come. I've looked at Keely Ringo out of Georgia. Would be a phenomenal fit. I think really, really solid fit there. Someone else, he killed the combine. Julius Brents out of Kansas State. Absolutely, I mean, off the charts at the combine. Turn on the tape and you'll see a lot of the same thing with that really quick burst, nose for the football. I think would be a great fit there too. They've got their options there for them. If they wanted to go cornerback earlier and then come back and get some depth at the edge positions. I think you're probably likely going to see them double up on a couple of positions. Would not be shocked there because just the war of attrition is real for both of those positions, and the Colts experienced it in the last 2 seasons. So they got to stay healthy. So don't be shocked if you see 2 quarterbacks in this draft, 2 utility defensive linemen. So maybe someone who plays linebacker and edge who could do both, who could stand up. I mean, it would not shock me there. They've got to get better on those fronts.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. And, I'm glad you added that Christian Gonzalez was a freak of nature, because I thought you were just going to say freak, and I know Adina Howard would have been offended. Now, for those that don't know, that's an old joke right there. For those of a certain age, you kind of get that joke. But we'll talk about that another time. But
wow,
we have reached the end of the show, and of course, there is a game. We got 5 questions, 2 answers, and 1 choice. Meghan Hall, are you ready?
Of course. Let's do this. Let's go.
All right. Now, Isaiah McKenzie is a guy that you brought up, free agent that they brought in from the Buffalo Bills to be their slot wide receiver. Do you think he goes over 500 yards receiving this year, or is he under 500 yards receiving this year?
I'm going to say over 750.
Ooh, okay, all right, 750. All right, slang. That means they're slinging that ball around a little bit.
Well, if you've been paying attention, you know Shane Steichen plans to.
Oh yeah, I know. But I thought he might want to use a little JT back there, But hey, we'll see what happens. All right, another guy that Colts fans love to talk about in their myriad of tight ends, that'd be Mr. Mo Alley-Cox. Now, is he on or off the roster for the 2023 season, in your opinion?
The entire season? Is that the clarifying question? The entire season?
No, the beginning. If you want to say the beginning, if you want to say that, you definitely can clarify that. But I think there's a real possibility he doesn't make the roster.
I'm going to say that he's going to make the roster, but I do not think he will be there by the trade deadline.
Okay.
I think the Colts will keep their options open. The only reason I say that is it really depends on what you get out of training camp. How does Drew Ogletree look? How does Jelani Woods look? How does Kylan Granson look? And then did they draft a blocking tight end? Now, they did sign one in Barrow Brown recently, but again, depth and competition to see, if he can make the roster as well. It's going to get very interesting at tight end, so I'd keep my eye on that one.
I think Pharaoh Brown takes a spot, quite honestly, but we'll see what happens. He is switching from the Texans to the Colts, so that'll be an interesting kind of switch. People just swapping around. We got Robert Woods that went from the Titans to the Texans. You got Gardner Minshew coming back and playing for the Colts. You got all these people swapping around. Chris Moore going from the Texans to the actual Titans recently too. So you never know what could happen in this division. Kwity Paye. People have been waiting on him to have a breakout season. Is this season it? Does he go over or under 10 sacks this year?
I'm going to say over, but not by much. Maybe 11.
Okay. Well, the one big word for him is consistency. If he
It
can
is
show consistency, and I got another word for him, variety. Those two words are going to be key if he goes over 10 sacks. Now, another couple guys, like I mentioned, Bobby Okereke is not with the Colts anymore. He's with the Giants. EJ Speed is still there, though. And then, of course, you get Shaq Leonard back. So I'm going to ask you to pick between these two on who is going to have the most tackles for the team in 2023.
Oh, I'm going to go EJ Speed. I'm definitely going Speed. I think that if you've been paying attention to Shaq Leonard, the last couple of days, he said he still needs time. He wasn't fully healthy when he started playing last year and still not there now. He's definitely going to need time. So, yeah, give me EJ Speed. Or, well, yeah, actually give me EJ Speed because you still got Zaire Franklin, but I would be hard pressed to see Zaire actually put up that same sort of production he did this past year, although I think he's going to, put up similar numbers. So, let's do EJ Speed.
We'll definitely see what happens. And last, but certainly not least, I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, but a heavy run team or a balanced offense, which one are we likely to see from the Indianapolis Colts next year?
Of course you're going to ask me this. I'm thinking. This is tough because I think you need a balanced team, but there's a quote that I want to pull up because I know where my brain is going here. It's from Shane Steichen, and that's what I wanted to pull up here, but I can't find it. But if I remember correctly, Shane Steichen said in his opening presser that they want to throw to score points and run to win. So if I'm thinking that you're going to get a lot of throwing. Now, I think you're going to get a more balanced attack out of Jonathan Taylor because you got to keep him healthy. But definitely throwing. So I'm going to go balanced. We'll go balanced, but I would expect to see a heavy dose, a much more throwing than you saw this past season.
Well, I had balance, but I had it for a different reason. Because he said, whether the quote he just said, that makes me think he's going to be balancing running and throwing since he's winning or trying to score in some aspects. So it'll actually be a little balance. That's where my mind came from. I kind of threw one at you that kind of a little curveball a little bit.
A little bit.
But that is 5 questions, 2 answers, and 1 choice. And that is our show. I want to thank Meghan Hall for coming on, giving us an education on the Colts and the free agents and the departures and the draft, kind of giving a little education on that for those that aren't aware. I know I'm aware, but hey, I want to make sure that all the people that listen are aware of what all is going on with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, Meghan, I want you to go ahead and give everyone your information, where they can find you, where they can find your podcast, and where they can find a particular other thing that you're working on, if you'd like to mention that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter. It's at the Meghan Hall. Same thing on Instagram at the Meghan Hall. On YouTube, it's at Hall About Sports. That's HALL About Sports. And on TikTok, it's Hall About Sports Pod. So my podcast has just been recently rebranded. So now it's a play on words. I love a good pun. So it's Hall About Sports. And actually, this is me dropping it right now on, on your podcast. Hallaboutsports.com is coming. And it is I guess you could say it's a brand refresh. So hallaboutsports.com will be all of my passion projects. It'll be all the things I want to rant about, but don't have an organized space for, just things that I have thoughts on. You can also find my portfolio there. So all the things I'm working on with Colts Wire. And then, of course, the Hall About Sports podcast as well. And my writing from another site that I do, which is Murphy's Multiverse, which is pop culture site. Really, really fun to do. And it's always got a nice tie-in with sports as well. So check those out. Come find me on the internets.
All right, there you have it. And of course, if you want to come find me, I'm just the host of the show. But anyway, if you want to come find me, you can find me on Twitter at MikePatton82. That's MikePatton 82. And if you're looking for me on Instagram, you can find me at that's THA, not THE, _general_MP. Of course, touring the AFC South, you can find it on any listening platform, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music as well. And if you'd like to watch the visual portion of the show, or if you want to watch it just visually, the entire show, it is available on YouTube. Just search Touring the AFC South. I want to thank everyone again for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank everyone that commented in the Touring the AFC South inbox. I am Mike Patton. She's Meghan Hall. And you've been watching Touring the AFC South. We are out.